So Halloween is coming up, and I don't nearly have half of these done. I'm really way behind on these. So let's stretch it out till the end of November. You unlock this door with the key of imagination. Beyond it lies another dimension. A dimension of... I'm not really going to do the full Twilight Zone intro for this, am I? Seems kind of pointless. Everybody knows the show rules.
A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of imagination. Your next stop, the Twilight Zone.
Ask anybody what their introduction to classic horror and suspense is, and they'll probably say that it was the Twilight Zone. First broadcast in 1959, the Twilight Zone immediately made its mark as a source of genius storytelling, brilliant twists, and downright disturbing imagery. It was a phenomenal showcase of fantastic stories that were analogs of human misery and betrayal, societal imperfection, and pretty much anything that anybody could be scared of. Like a lot of kids my age, I had to wrestle the television away from my parents on New Year's Eve. They wanted to watch The Honeymooners and The Odd Couple, but the only marathon that I wanted to watch was on the Sci-Fi Channel. So I'm here today to give you the list of my favorite Twilight Zone episodes. I'm pulling from the Ultimate Collection, which had every single episode of the black and white era. Best 15 bucks I've ever spent. And the only criteria that I'm going to put for this is that it had to be from the original run, and it had to be actually aired once. And again, these are my favorites on a personal level. I'm not ranking them in honor of how scary they are, or how much impact they've had on the series, or what everybody else's favorites are. These are just, as I watch them, my absolute favorites. And I feel like I have to let you know that before we talk about the Christmas episode.
Someone should remind her that Christmas is more than barging up and down department store aisles and pushing people out of the way.
No, I don't care that this is a weird place to start off with. I love this episode. A drunk mall Santa is depressed that he's unable to actually make people happy around the holidays, since he lives in a poor neighborhood with lots of kids who are always wanting around Christmas. That is until he comes across a bag of garbage in the street, but upon looking into it, it's actually filled with wrapped gifts. He just spends the rest of the episode giving away the presents to all the poor kids and the adults in the neighborhood until he's completely run out and he realizes that he's had the happiest Christmas he's ever had in his life. And then he's approached by an elf and a sleigh full of reindeer, and he takes up the role as the new actual Santa Claus. Yes, this is a Twilight Zone episode. The same series that had aliens eating people, killer living dolls, and telekinetic children torturing their family. We got a really feel-good story about Art Carney giving out presents to the homeless.
That's why I drink, Mr. Dunny. And that's why I weep. So that when I walk down the tenements, I can really think it's the North Pole and the children are elves and that I'm really Santa Claus.
I love how desperately emotional Santa gets at the beginning of the episode, devastated by the fact that he has to give promises of toys to rich kids in the mall, knowing that those promises will definitely come true, but then he breaks down in front of kids in the poor neighborhoods, knowing that he'll never be able to actually give them anything of the sort. And I love how ecstatic he gets, knowing that the minute he gives somebody something as simple as a jacket or a walking cane, he knows it'll mean the world to them.
All I know is I've got a Santa Claus bag here that gives everybody exactly what they want for Christmas, and as long as it's putting out, I'm putting in.
The fact that this comes from a series like Twilight Zone, it's so out of place. It's like something you'd see in a Mickey's Once Upon a Christmas special or something. But it still makes you feel so damn good. The performances, the emotion, everything about it makes it worthwhile. And I watch it every holiday season. Weird place to start, I know. It'll get darker, trust me.
There's a wondrous magic to Christmas, and there's a special power reserved for little people. In short, there's nothing mightier than the meek.
Sorry, let's go from Santa to something that's a little bit more standard for Twilight Zone. Like death.
Don't you see? He might be him.
Him?
Mr. Death.
A police officer is shot outside an old woman's house and begs for her help. She's resistant to let him in, but eventually agrees to help nurse him back to health. She was reluctant to get him because she's been living alone for years, believing that death is following her and looking for a chance to kill her. When some building contractors come by to inspect her home and foreclose on her, though, they don't happen to see the man because, okay, sometimes the twist is the main part of the episode, so if that's the case for any of these episodes, I'll give you a little bit of a warning that it's coming. It's death. She let in death.
You tricked me.
Like a lot of great Twilight Zone episodes, this one really relies on the acting of only two main people. There's the old woman, and there's the police officer. The police officer, played by an almost unrecognizably young Robert Redford.
There's nothing to be afraid of. We're alone here, and there's nobody at the door.
She's convinced that she's seeing death more visibly because she's getting old, and death is more waiting for the right moment to strike. And because of that, she's given up on completely everything in her life.
How can you live like this?
But if I don't live like this, I won't live at all. If I don't watch out, if I let down even for a moment, he'll get in.
She hasn't seen the sun in years. She wouldn't even leave for food. I mean, as far as we can tell, it's working. So when Death appears and tricks her into letting him into her home, he proves that she had nothing to worry about. The person she's been avoiding this whole time is really nice.
Am I really so frightening? You've talked to me? You've confided in me? Have I tried to hurt you?
He's there to take her into the afterlife hand in hand, not kicking and screaming against her will. I always like when Twilight Zone depicts Death as a person, and that'll definitely come up later in the countdown, but this Death is so warm and welcoming. It's just a great moment when she finally takes his hand. She doesn't even notice when she dies.
No engulfment. No tearing asunder. What you feared would come like an explosion is like a whisper.
It's a great episode that leads up to a fantastic moment where you finally see her leave the house, and it's just a great ending. But remember, she's been living in that room for 20 years. It probably could have used a little airing out anyway, even before there was a dead body in there.
And like all of us was frightened of the dark, but who discovered in a minute last fragment of her life that there was nothing in the dark that wasn't there when the lights were on.
There's really no way to ease into this. This episode is about the Holocaust.
Good afternoon, Captain, and welcome back. We've been waiting.
A former SS officer who was stationed in Dachau returns to the concentration camp he ran after years on the run. He joyously remembers his sadistic acts in uniform until a face from his past comes out to confront him. A former prisoner of the camp who corners the captain and puts him on trial for the hundreds of thousands of people he was directly responsible for killing. I think the thing that hits me the most about this episode is that it came out 16 years after World War II ended. 16 years, and we've got a really twisted story about a former SS officer being tormented by the literal ghosts of his past.
You didn't bury them deep enough, Captain. You didn't cover them up with enough earth. Or perhaps the bullets were too small a caliber, or the flames not sufficiently hot, or perhaps there wasn't enough gas.
Again, the episode works really well with a limited cast, with the attention focused on only one or two people at a time. And so a lot of this episode has to do with reactions and dialogue, and this guy's fantastic. The actor's name is Oscar Beregi Jr., and everything you want in a crazy character actor is there. A great voice, a domineering, creepy presence, and what I can only describe as resting bug eyes.
At this gate, you shot down hundreds of people with machine guns. Do you feel it now, Captain? Do you feel the bullets smashing into your body?
His punishment is all of the pain of every single torture inflicted on him at the same time. It is a perfect punishment for an agent of Hitler. And at the end of the episode, it brings up a great message about leaving spaces like this up the way they were, so that they are learned from and never repeated.
All of them. They must remain standing because they are a monument to a moment in time when some men decided to turn the earth into a graveyard.
It's one of Rod Serling's greatest, most fearless scripts. And it comes from a personal place, seeing as how Serling was a 4th grade technician in the U.S. Army during World War II. And was Jewish.
But this is only the beginning, Captain. Only the beginning. Your final judgment will come from God.
By the way, we live in a weird time, and I just wanted to say for the record on my show, fuck Nazis. That felt good. I should do that more often.
Something to dwell on and to remember. Not only in the Twilight Zone, but wherever men walk God's earth.
The only reason why that episode isn't higher up is because I can't watch it as many times as the other ones because it's so powerful. So let's talk about one that I can watch over and over again because it has Ed Wynn in it. A somewhat unlucky salesman named Lou Bookman is scheduled to die, and collecting his soul is none other than Mr. Death. Not Dr. Death, he was busy teaming with John Laurinaitis in Japan at the time. Anyway, Mr. Death confronts Bookman and tells him he's going to die at midnight. And Bookman says he's not ready to go because he's never given a perfect sales pitch.
A pitch big enough for the skies to open up. You know, a pitch for the angels.
So Death gives him a reprieve, but he has to take a soul in his place and goes after a little girl who lives in his neighborhood. Realizing that he has to do something, Bookman distracts the devil with a crazy sales pitch as he's waiting to take the girl's soul. He succeeds, Death misses his appointment, and the little girl lives.
1 minute past 12, Mr. Bookman. And you made me miss my appointment.
Thank God.
The episode doesn't really need much more other than Ed Wynn interacting with Murray Hamilton. They have a great chemistry together. And like I said, Death takes on a lot of forms in the Twilight Zone, and this is my favorite personification. It's a strict, efficient businessman. He collects notes on the person's life, makes appointments. The whole thing is run like a well-oiled machine, even allowing Bookman to know the exact time of his death.
Time of departure is midnight tonight. I trust that will suit you. The preordination is for death during sleep. I assume this, too, will meet with your approval.
You never get the feeling that Bookman is selfish by not wanting to die or that he wants somebody else to suffer in his place. So what really sells this episode for me is the pitch.
What are you doing, Mr. Bookman?
Oh, just setting up a pitch, that's all.
At this time of night?
Sells the episode because he's a salesman. Anyway, it's awesome. He sets up in the middle of the night right in front of the girl's door and proceeds to just completely lure Death into his sales routine. He gives his gusto in this, making even the dumbest things like ties and trinkets into unbelievably desirable items, to the point where Death himself is sweating and breathing heavily at the thought of buying string.
But at the ridiculously low price of 25 cents a spoon.
I'll take all you have.
And when he causes Death to miss his appointment, he happily packs up his stuff and goes with Death into the great unknown in her place.
Well, I guess it's time for me now.
As per our agreement.
Well, I'm ready.
This episode hits all the right notes for me. I love it.
Louis J. Bookman, age 60-ish. Occupation, pitchman.
You know what I hate? The 50s. Not like the decade, the 50s, but like television depictions of the 50s. Everybody's happy and peaceful. People get along with their neighbors and they have identical lawns, cars, and haircuts. I hate that ridiculous amount of Leave It to Beaver style cheeriness in one collected space. Which is why I really enjoy What Happened on Maple Street. After seeing a flashing light in the sky, the residents of Maple Street begin having problems with all of their electronics. A young kid brings up that it's eerily similar to a comic he read about aliens living among humans, and it's only made worse when one man's car starts.
Him and his whole family. Real oddball.
Yeah, why didn't he come out with the rest of us to look?
What do you say we go ask him?
Little by little, the townspeople become more suspicious as the electronics are randomly turned on, and the town starts turning into a violent mob, going after everybody who's different, thinking they're an alien. But it turns out, the flashing light actually was a UFO who's been messing with the electronics on all the streets.
Just stop a few of their machines and radios and telephones and lawnmowers. throw them into darkness for a few hours, and then sit back and watch the pattern.
I actually remember reading the script for this episode in a class in middle school, and I'm pretty sure it's what got me to start watching The Twilight Zone in the first place. And man, is this a great place to start. This is hands down one of the best scripts in series history. Watching the neighborhood dive into chaos slowly and gradually is really satisfying, and the pacing of the episode is what makes it so believable and creepy. It starts off with confusion, turns into skepticism, and then combusts into anger and violence, all because a few people can't turn on their blenders.
It was this kid who knew what was going to happen. He was the one who knew. How did he know? How could he have known?
I think my favorite thing about this is the level to which people are willing to jump on the slightest belief that any of their neighbors could be an alien. The kid reads a comic about Martians, so clearly he is a Martian himself. That one guy has a ham radio, so clearly he's using it to communicate with monsters from another world. That guy likes looking up at the stars at night. Which, I'm sorry, but before color TV, I just assumed that's what everybody did, other than go to sock hops and rumble with the greasers. The reveal that it's actually aliens controlling the electricity is a great one, and basically says that if something is smart enough to get humans to kill each other, it's more powerful than any weapon we can ever come up with.
Their world is full of maple streets. And we'll go from one to the other and let them destroy themselves. One to the other.
Kind of amazing when something that was made in the 60s is still relevant today, isn't it?
And the pity of it is that these things cannot be confined to the Twilight Zone.
Now, my favorite episode of The Twilight Zone is probably different from yours. It doesn't have a shocking twist like Time Enough at Last. It doesn't deal with aliens or demons or even take place anywhere outside of one room. But it's got a level of tension and suspense that no other episode of the show has, or probably ever will again.
That's Brown. That's Brown. Lister's Pool Room. Randolph Street, Chicago.
A game of pool follows Jesse Cardiff, played by Jack Klugman from The Odd Couple. He's a pool shark who's beaten everybody in his run-of-the-mill town and claims to be the best of all time, even better than local legend Fats Brown, played by one of my favorite people in entertainment, Jonathan Winters.
But you're
dead? Not really. As long as people talk about you, you're not really dead.
Ghost of Fats Brown pays Jesse a visit and challenges him to a high-stakes game of pool to finally decide who's the best.
Life or death. You beat me, and you live. You lose, and you die.
And after a long, strenuous game that lasts the entirety of the episode, Jesse is victorious, and he officially replaces Fats as the best ever, which means that he's forced to take his place, accepting challenges from anyone who claims to be better than he is. The price of being a legend.
Report at once to Mason's Pool Hall, Sandusky, Ohio.
If there is one thing that sells this as my favorite episode, it's not the premise, it's not the setting, it's not the twist, which honestly is just kind of okay. It's the acting. The entire episode, aside from one disembodied voice and the narration from Sterling himself, consists of nothing but interactions between Klugman and Winters. And their chemistry is gold.
You like to play with fire, but you don't like to cook. You're not as good as you claim, and you know it. Deep down, you know that you're second rate.
I knew I had an eye for this game.
What happened to it?
I almost made it.
Every single line of dialogue strikes hard and swift, and there isn't a second wasted on screen between them. It's filmed and worked out almost like a stage play, but there's no way you could make this into an actual play because the pool playing has to be precise.
How about that, fat boy?
Not bad.
That was great.
And there is so much brilliant back and forth between these two, even over the simplest thing.
Now, you made me do that. You made me miss.
Come on, a little gamesmanship, a little fun, and you come apart.
I could honestly hear them talk for hours. Fats constantly picking apart Jesse's supposed lack of skill, Jesse's arrogant boasts about beating guys twice his age. I think my favorite part is the fact that Fats is constantly trying to get Jesse to quit, and it's played off like he's toying with him or making fun of him.
You wouldn't believe this, Jesse, but personally, I'd like to see you win. Yeah.
But then you see just how much Jesse obsesses over the game, how much time he's lost in the pool hall, how this is the only thing he's ever done with his life. Fats is constantly giving him clues to get out while he still can, experience life a little bit, enjoy the time he has on Earth, because even Fats' bet is self-serving.
Shoot that ball, and you may win more than you bargained for.
There's nothing you can say that will stop me.
I'm sorry. I was required to say that.
Because once Jesse's obsession with beating him leads to him finally being victorious, it's all he'll ever do. Trapped forever in a state of waning and only being able to do that one thing for eternity. This episode has amazing pacing, brilliant scripting, a few minutes of cheap laughs and tension-breaking insults. It's just fantastic. And there are times where I would put this on in the background while I was working on something else, and I find myself completely unable to focus because I have to stare at the screen and watch it again in its entirety. It's that good.
You sore loser. I beat you.
I beat you fair and square.
For some reason, if you haven't watched a lot of the Twilight Zone, I highly recommend it. Because this doesn't even scratch the surface of the brilliance of the series. This is just 6 of my favorites. There are 156 episodes in the original run alone. And from personal experience, I don't think there's been a really bad episode. Not to mention that the show's been remade several times with a few good adaptations in the 80s and the 2000s, both of which have some pretty good episodes. And there's even a reboot being planned that's being run by Jordan Peele. And if Get Out is any indication, we are in very good hands leaving this with him. Almost the whole series is on Netflix right now, and I know it's a lot of episodes, but seriously, try to watch every one. This show is a hotbed of creative writing, sympathetic characters, twists and turns, and it has only gotten better with age. So let me know what your favorites are, because there is always room for another story to tell from this series. Because this is the dimension of imagination. It is a place we like to call the Twilight Zone. I know, my Rod Serling impression sucks. Sorry.
Next week on The Twilight Zone. We hope you'll be able to be with us. Thank you, and good night.
Next time, we're going to look at something a little bit more recent. A low-budget film that was actually shot in an insane asylum.
Hey there. Do it, Gordon.